So it's organized jointly by the Institute Albert Hirschman Center on Democracy here in Geneva and by the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, with my colleague, Professor Rusha Das. So it's an endeavor of scientific relevance because we aim at bringing together research on democracy and green transitions from a variety of disciplinary approaches, from environmental sciences to political sciences, so social anthropology. We have also many engineers joining, and also policymakers, civil servants, activists. So we are very glad to have this opportunity to get together between Geneva and cities of India, between institutions of Switzerland and of India, and I would like to acknowledge the support of the Swiss Leading House for South Asia and Iran, which is a program from the Secretary of Research and Innovation of the Swiss federal government, aiming at supporting the collaboration between South Asian and Swiss institutions. So I'm very happy to welcome our two speakers today. Pauline Plagnat-Cantoreggi, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Geneva and at its Environmental Sciences Institute. Her research and teaching focuses on development and environmental issues, particularly in Southeast Asia, on interdisciplinarity in environmental sciences, environmental governance and public policies, and also environmental economics and ecological economics. Since 2020, Pauline Plagnat is also the mayor of a village, Machilly in France, nearby France, and the vice president of the community of communes of Annemasse, Agglo, in charge of the energetic transition and participative democracy. Our second guest is Professor Trilochan Sastry, who is professor at the Center for Public Policy at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. He pursued a BTech in electrical engineering from IIT Delhi, an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad, and a PhD in operations research from the MIT in the USA. He is also the founder and the chairman of the Association for Democratic Reforms, which has been working on electoral and political reforms for over 25 years, and it also won several public interest litigations in the Supreme Court. Trilochan Sastry also founded the Center for Collective Development, promoting cooperatives for small farmers in dryland areas, and from Veda, a social venture benefiting farmer. So we are really honored to have you, the two of you, joining this public event, precisely because we wanted to explore further the different roles that you have been having, both in your capacity as researchers, scientists, professors, or as academics, but also as elected representatives or founders of civil society organizations. So I would like to first speak about your experiences in your two regions that you have been involved in, and also to share with us some key activities that you would like to point out as key to foster green transitions. So I would first invite you, Pauline. Thank you.
So thank you very much for listening to what I'm going to try to share with you from my experience as much as a researcher, but also as a local political implementation of green transition in a territory that is very, very unequal, and who is not always very enthusiastic about green transition. But I'd like to begin with the fact that since the moment I've been doing my PhD was in South Korea. How South Korea came from a rapid economic growth policy to a more sustainable development path. during the 2000s. And I have to admit that all the historical knowledge of environmental global issues always show that world have changed since about 50 years, since the first recognition of environmental issues to the new environmental issues that are more citizen-led social demands, I would say. And we always try to balance between the imposition of norms, of laws that should enact a few behavioral action for green transition. Well, actually, at the first, it was much more on protection of national parks and biodiversity, and it was very sectorial environmental protection. And little by little, awareness about the more global issues came into light. And we can almost say that today, the issue is not so much about the environmental skepticism or climato-skepticism. It's still 10 or 20% of the population, but it's much more about the climato resignation, I would say. Let's say that we don't know what we should do. Because if we want to do something to change, it means renouncing to a way of life, renouncing to a lot of things that we have been able to reach. A way of life, wealth, and a lot of things that we need to renounce to be able to foster the green transition. And therefore, all about the different type of issues, I can try to stake 3 types of issues. The first one are the very global issues like climate change, like the acidification of the ocean, all the issues that are with retroactive effects and which are not tangible for the individualities. And the second types of environmental issues are much more about resources. How can we manage depletion of resources? How can we try to see the long-term effect of the substitutability of flows of resources and stock of resources? And therefore, we can see that all these have been taken into the environmental economics things and the preference individual choices that are led by economic methods. And therefore, people can see it's tangible, but we can always think that technological advancement, technological amelioration will be able to take this and to solve everything. And the third issue, environmental issue, is much more about health, global health, public health, all the impacts of our way of life on health, like pollution, air quality, and chemicals, the persistent polluting things, and all the chemicals. We've seen the PFAS, the PFAS, all with Stefan, with all the wet clothes and all the stuff like that, which has an impact, and also all the agricultures and food and all the things that affects directly our health. And this is very tangible for people, and from this we can really act because people can see the effect on their own individuality, and so it's a lot easier to try to do something about this. This said, we're not done yet. Why? Because we are in a democracy, in France, in Switzerland, we are democratic countries, and therefore people have a say, people need to accept all the norms, all the laws, everything we're trying to do to implement all what is needed to be done to correct the situation, to adapt, to mitigate the situation. And therefore, we are trying to live through, in political ways, into this prevention, precaution, and responsibility principles. So we are trying to prevent everything that could harm the society. Yes, but people need to see that. They need to understand that, and they need to accept that. And the issues at stake for democracy is the social acceptability. And therefore, we've got a very, very, very big challenge ahead of us. Because that's not only the level of awareness, but that's also about the inequalities to access the knowledge and also the trust into the data, into the information that is at the basis of every political decision. And so we need absolutely to balance all these different types of publics. We've got publics of elected representatives who are not always aware of things and who think they are as representatives of their village, of their town. They need to represent the interest of their towns, and if the town doesn't want to reduce the number of cars that are circulating in the town, they say, okay, my people don't want to, and so I'm not going to do that. That's one type of public. But the other type of public, and the one we are talking about, it as a citizen. And the citizens are also cut into three types, I would say, three types of citizens. We've got 10-20% of the citizens who are climato-skeptical or reluctant to act. They are very comfortable in their life. They don't want anything, and they say, okay, I don't care if my car is polluting. You say that my car is polluting. I don't feel anything, and I'm not going to change my way of life for that. That's 10-20% of the population. You've got 10 or 20% of the population who are very aware that there is something to be done and who wants to do something. That's the citizens who are in association, that's the citizens who are trying to be motors of the changes. They are the ones who are trying to implement things and ask for government to do something more than what is being done. And that's 10 or 20% of the population, and they are already convinced, and they are already trying to live their lives in accordance of what they are aware of about environmental issues. And there are 60 to 80% of people who heard about something, who are quite aware of all this, and they just need something to push them to do something. So usually economics people or political people don't want to impose things. They say, okay, for these people, we are trying to just invent nudges. You heard about nudges? And the nudges are the little thing that we are that are representative of the symbolic of to push people to do different kind of behaviors, like when you are putting some lights on the stairs. So when people go on the stairs, they will see the light, and it's very entertaining, and so they will take the stairs instead of taking the elevators, stuff like that. And so these little nudges try to make people beneficiary of an act that is greener than the others. But that's very, very small steps, and it's not enough to do something. And that's why one of the biggest challenge for us, local politicians, is to try to implement actions that will try to convince the critical mass without always just imposing things. We need to find the balance between the acceptability and the imposition, because sometimes you just have to do norms. And that's, if you want, that's my job. actually. So what I've said until now, that's what my research led me to understand. But on the other side, when I am at the community of communes in Annemasse Agglo, or I'm with the Great Geneva and trying to foster this charter for environmental Great Geneva in transition for 2050, what we're trying to do is to try to understand how much people can take on imposition of norms and laws, and how much they are not going to be able to do. And so to try to do that, when we work on that, there are three keywords that we need to always keep in mind. That's effectiveness of the measure. If it's just a symbolic measure that has no efficiency, maybe we should not push that, especially when there is no social acceptability. Because the second word is social acceptability. How much people are we going to have protests on the street because we're going to push a measure or another? And the third one is communication. If the measure can be communicated without having to write a handbook to be able to implement the measure. And that's a very big issue in France, because in France, every time you try to do something, you have to write a big book in that. I mean, try just to compare the electoral code when you want to be a mayor in France and in Switzerland. In Switzerland, you've got an outlet of 10 pages. In France, I had to read 100 pages to be able to understand what I should do to be able to present myself as a mayor. So you see, we've got all different ways of doing things, and in France we complicated everything in administration. But anyway, so that communicability is very, very important, because people need to understand what we want to do. And so once I've said that, you don't know what I'm doing yet. And so the first thing is to try to make public meetings so we can raise the level of awareness and give the best information to the people so they will accept the measure. One bias about these public meetings is usually you only have all those who agree, okay? So all those who are already convinced and want you to do much more than what you propose, and those who are completely opposed and who don't want to do anything about it. And you end up in meetings, if you want to co-build things with those people, that's quite difficult, actually, because it doesn't reflect what the 60–80% target will be able to do. And so you just try to just give the same level of information. Why? Because access to information is crucial. And we know, especially after the COVID and especially after a few episodes, we know that we have a very big epistemological rift in democratic countries, societies, because people don't access the same type of information and don't get the same type of information, and therefore there is a very strong defiance about the trust that what we tell them. When you go to a public meeting and you try to talk about the biomass chaufferie, I don't know how to heating systems, and you've got people who are arriving and say, I am against because it's going to pollute, or it's going to be just in front of my house, or thing like that. And you're trying to give them the right numbers and how much exactly the biomass heating system will produce of PM10 and the small particles and stuff like that. They say, oh, I've seen something on TV and they don't say the same thing, and I don't know what to trust. Say, okay, you should trust the institutional things. And they say, oh no, I don't trust institutional. So people just want to believe what they want. And they all have what you heard all the time, the alternative truth. And we are right here in what Hannah Arendt is calling the opposition between the truth, the institutional truth, and the opinion truth. And we are confronting the two of them. And right now, we are putting them on the same level of importance in a public debate. And so we have to be very aware of that when we are doing these public debates. And so what I've been doing what in France, I don't know if it went outside of France, well, in Switzerland, yes, but outside, I don't know. It's what we call the fresque du climat, the climate fresco, which is a type of game that put some, that explain in very pedagogical way all the retroaction understanding of climate change. And we've got a lot of people who are coming and trying to implement that into the logic of people. And so I've been doing that in public meetings for elective representative. So everyone should have the same level of information. And then the second type of participatory that I'm trying to do is with the elective representatives. We know that nowadays there's only 10 to 20% of the population who are electing green transition people. If you present yourself as a green transition people, people are not going to vote for you and you are not going to be elected. So the fact is, if you want to do something, you need to have also the other elected representative on your side. And so you have to go and talk to them and convince them. So I also did the fresque of climat with them. And we are, all the different types of implementation I've been trying to do, I've been co-building them with them. Meaning that when I wanted to do land planning, that was favoring energy and climate buildings of houses and land planning of the area. The principles were common for all Annemasse Agglo, for all the community of communes, for them to implement them. So I've been doing all this, building them with all the elective representatives. And so when we needed to say, okay, yes, we agree on that, I could agree with this booklet with all different tools to do that. And it took us 1.5 years to build that, but now it has been voted and it's going to be implemented in the next 2 years. So that's how I'm trying to work, building the consensus, knowing that we are not going to be able to do a green transition that is perfect, but we are trying to make it the more consensual possible for this critical mass I was talking about to accept it and to move towards this kind of steps. And so I could give you a lot of different type of example of what I did on this type of basis of building policies, because but in France, you know, we've got a very centralized country, so Matignon and well, right now they don't decide anything except cutting the budget, which they don't seem to agree on. But anyway, we've got all the Paris are going to decide everything, and then they give different competencies at different levels, regional, departmental, and then the community of communes, and last of it, the villages and towns. But we don't have any money, we don't have anything just to implement things. We just have to implement things. And so how can I try to go ahead of what they are doing, and how can I implement things without the money to do that? It's only when you try to build it with your other colleagues, other representatives, that you can make things. And that's how I'm working on that. And well, I'd like to finish up with all this, the thing that we are, it's the most important challenges are what we call the social locks that will prevent to change to reform in depth everything, because we've got the institutional logs, the ecological, the social, and the social, the political, the economic, and the institutional logs, what we call the dependency path of behaviors that are going to be very difficult to change because people are not yet ready to renounce anything, and so we are moving on the verge of what people are really going to be able to do. And Foucault was saying that everything that was historically and politically institutionalized can be reformed. Okay, yes, but to what ecological cost and to what societal cost if we are not doing it? And that's about the habitability and the fact that we can live or not in a society, and that's where comes the donut, the donut of Kate Raworth that we are not able yet to translate into territorial policies. That's what.
Thank you so much, Pauline, for sharing all this and for this very informative and thought-provoking talk. I think you walked us through many of the levels that need to be worked on, from the social acceptability of the measures to how to make these measures, how to design them on the ground, and also how to sustain them. So in the conference we have proposed the title of Green Transitions in Plural, precisely because we want to explore the meanings of green transition, of just transition in different parts of the world, in different contexts, institutional contexts, but also how democracies have been empowering their citizens to think about and to react, to act about transitions. And I would like to hear from you, Trilochan Sastry, about your experience in India. How has your experience on working towards democratic reforms, as is the name of your organization, and at the same time to push for a more equitable and more sustainable and greener path of development?
Okay.
I think, yes, we can hear you.
But maybe I can
there
just
is
switch.
some slides.
Yeah, I know how to do that.
Oh, okay.
I think.
I think it's from the...
Yeah, from the computer. So you should just
Okay.
go to PowerPoint.
No, where is this?
At the bottom
Just at the
here?
bottom here.
Yeah, but I can't say. Oh,
Yes.
here. Yes.
Okay.
I'm screening it. I hope I can.
Yeah,
I can't
just
see that, right?
Yeah, just
Yeah, you're here.
Where is it?
Yeah, there.
Exactly. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you. And I wish we had more politicians like you. Not only in Switzerland, but in other countries as well. I have been asked to speak about democracy. The work that we do is on democracy. But a few remarks about green democracy, as you're saying, because since yesterday we have been hearing about it. It's a big issue in India, but as she rightly said, anybody who stands for elections on a green platform is not going to win. Nobody has won. One or two people tried. It doesn't work. So I will leave that part to the experts, and I'll come back to the kind of work that we have done. And one more thing I would like to say is that behind this whole green issue that we are focusing on, there's some larger issues of democracy which impact how the green democracy also works. And just one line aside, we also work on what I call economic democracy. The reason is, unlike Switzerland, India has the world's largest number of poor people, one of the highest inequality indices in the world, rich and poor. So therefore, economic democracy is important, and the instrument that we have used is to promote small farmer cooperatives. I'm not going to talk about that, but just to mention that we need green democracy, we need economic democracy, of course we need political democracy as well. I'm just trying to give you a context Yesterday I was looking at the numbers. I think Switzerland has a population of 9 million, little less than 9 million. Some of us in this room, we come from Bangalore, which is just one city. Its population is 14 million, more than Switzerland. There are 7 cities in India whose population is more than 9 million. 7 cities in India. Then I was looking at Italy, many of our friends are from Italy. Your population is about 60 million. The state from which we come, Karnataka, not the country, has about 70 million people. Just one state. And of course, India has 1.4 billion people, etc. So, well, we have a whole set of problems, and environment is just one of the problems. It's not, for many people, it's not the biggest problem. If you are a passionate researcher on green democracy, it is the most important thing in the universe for you, but it may not be so for a lot of people out there. That's the point. Not that it's not an important issue, but it may not be the one that gets people up and running. Now, coming back to the context, we have a strange democracy. I mean, we have a politician here. We spent $16 billion in the parliamentary elections about 4 or 5 months ago, which is more than what Donald Trump and what's her name, Kamala Harris are together spending in the United States. But of course, the United States is much more wealthy than India. So we spend a lot of money on things like elections. Now, one of the big issues, I don't know whether it's true in Switzerland, that we face is, let me put it in blunt terms, the capture of big governments by big money. So that is one big elephant in the room, because the governments then bend over backwards to make policies and laws which will help big money rather than necessarily help the people. If the people also benefit, well, good luck to them, but that may not be the primary thing. So that's what I mean here, capture of big money. I'm going to skip over this, but the NGO that we started, we went to the Supreme Court of India and said that candidates standing for elections must declare any criminal cases that they have. So the number of elected representatives with criminal cases is very high. Of course, I was, I don't know whether I should say I'm happy. I was intrigued to see that Donald Trump has been convicted of 34 counts or something like that. In India, he would be disqualified from standing for elections unless he was exonerated before the election. He would not be allowed to stand. That is partly the work that we have been doing. Now, the other thing is diversity. Many of us are from Europe here. We think of Europe as a very diverse nation, right? Or whatever, continent. So many languages, French, German, English, Italian, I don't know what languages people speak. But in India, we have 17 constitutionally recognized languages, 300 dialects at least, some 1,000 what we call castes or jatis, and every major religion in the world is present in India. You have Hindus, which are the majority. You have Muslims, you have Christians, you have Jews, and you have the Indian religions like Buddhists, Jains, and we even have Zoroastrians from Iran. We even have a Jewish population. So that's the diversity that we have. It's a world unto itself, and it's ethnically very diverse, because if you go right up to the north, you will find blonde, blue-eyed people in Upper Kashmir, and you will find very dark-skinned people in the south, and you will find people of Chinese or Mongoloid, I don't know what is the right racial term, and then you have people like me. So we have all kinds of races in the country. So racially, ethnically, religiously, caste-wise, and language-wise, we are in my opinion, the most diverse nation in the world. I mean, if you know anything more than that, please let me know. Now, this is the problem that we face in politics. As a politician, you understand what this means. You understand fully what this means. Now, one or two things, this device is highly used and misused. I don't know whether it's used or misused in Europe, but India tops in hate speech. So we have a lot of fake news and, I'll give you an example of this. There are videos circulating which will say that people of such and such a religion, you please leave the country and go. You are not allowed to live here. And so on and so forth. Then we have another peculiar thing in India, which is, I don't see that in other countries. We have what I call internal migration. People moving from rural areas to the cities, not necessarily permanently. They go during the agriculture off season and then they come back. And the government of India says that about 300 to 450 million people are migrants, internal migrants within India. What is the population of Europe? Is it more than this or less than this? I don't know. Less than this.
Yeah, it's about
Just about the same.
Yeah, just
500
about,
million.
Yeah, whatever.
Depends what you call Europe.
Yes. You decide, sir. I can't decide what is Europe. So we have many, many issues. That's why this green thing is very important, but you can see, this is not where we are. So why do we need electoral reforms? You see, when there is extreme inequality and all these different groups of people, increasingly over time, it is what we call identity-based politics. I speak this language, I belong to this caste, I am from this religion, and therefore, it's like Donald Trump all over again. I mean, other than a certain group of Americans, everybody else is bad. We're going to build a wall around Mexico and, that kind of stuff. We have it all the time in India. So that kind of rhetoric is there all the time because the nature of the society is making, you have extreme inequality and then you have this identity-based politics. That's how it runs. And a huge amount of money, you see, I'll tell you, digress for half a minute. I read that in the 19th century, in New York, they used to bribe people $10 to $30 to vote for them. So candidates used to send their agents to people's homes and say, here is $10 and up to $30, you please vote for such and such a guy. We are about 100 years behind New York on that. This is still happening in India. People are bribed to vote and huge amounts of money are spent in the elections. One of the reasons is this. So there are so many, I'll tell you an innovative thing. I asked the chap who used to work in our office, who's from a working class background. I said, are they going to bribe you? Have they started bribing you for the elections? He said, no, they'll start on Monday. I said, how do you know that? He says they're going home to home and giving a red coupon and a yellow coupon. He said, what is this? He says, you take the red coupon and you go to that shop and he'll give you one chicken. When you take the yellow coupon and go to the other shop, he'll give you a bottle of liquor. This is against the law, by the way. Bribing of voters is against the law. So overuse of money, the legal limit, I don't know how to translate, how much is 9.5 million?
9 crores?
Huh?
9 crores? No.
1 crore, yeah. How much is that in euros or Swiss francs? Yeah, maybe about 150 or 200,000 is the limit, but maybe less than that, maybe 100 to 150,000 Swiss francs, I'm guessing. but they spend 10 times that amount of money. And the other thing that is happening is, one is you spend money from the political party or the candidate to bribe voters, but there's the government treasury out there. So you open the treasury and say, I'll give you this for free. So for example, in the last elections, people were told in the state of Karnataka that women will travel on buses for free. So they won the election. So this kind of, that's how it is. Huh? And then the other thing is, we have about 200 political parties in India, not 2 or 3. Out of them, about 30 or 40 are actually win elections. And because of what is happening, this big churn, people are constantly changing from one political party to the other. So the ideology of a party or its economic policy is only for show. There is no such thing. The real thing is, how do I win the election? There is no ideology out there. That's what it seems to me. Although they do speak about ideology. So this frequent change of political parties and the number of criminals are going on, political party funding is very opaque. That's another big elephant in the room. There are very little information available on who is funding the political party. Where is the money coming from? And huge amounts of money are being spent. So these are the problems that we started tackling. So that's the background of this. Just one or two other things. The average number of voters per constituency, we call it 16 lakhs, is 1.6 million people. 1.6 million people are represented on average by one member of parliament. You can do the math. And the next highest is the United States, where about 500,000 people are represented by congressmen. And in Switzerland, I believe you have about 5.5 million voters. I don't know. That's what I could make out. And each how many 21,000 voters per constituency?
Yeah, but that's at the federal level. We've got so many different types of levels.
Yeah, maybe you have more voters in Geneva, I don't know, per constituency.
No, we've got less.
Yeah, she's got less. So you can see, where is 20,000 and where is 1.6 million? I mean, so where is the representation? I mean, we are just living in a different world. We have more than 2,000 registered political parties, and 200 MPs, means members of parliament, have won with less than 50% of the votes cast. So one question arises, who is a people's representative? What percentage of votes do you need to be called? If there are 10 people standing, you're number one. You have won the election, but you may be getting only 35% of the votes. And then these guys are only working for the interests of their own voters, not for those bad guys who didn't vote for them. So the quality of representation is not good, etc., etc. So I've mentioned about all this. So what are the remedies? We set up an organization called the Association for Democratic Reforms about 25 years ago. Our analysis was not as good back then as it is now. I think we have understood better over the 25 years. So the first thing we said is transparency. So we went after the Supreme Court and we said that candidate information should be made public. So we've won about 15 petitions in the Supreme Court. We have a peculiar term in India called a public interest litigation. So normally when you go to the court, you are an aggrieved person. But we are not personally aggrieved, we are filing it on behalf of the public, saying that public interest is at stake and therefore we need transparency, etc. So we have won about 12 or 13 cases on transparency. Now, transparency in candidates and political parties. So political party funding and candidate information is, we have achieved that to some extent. This whole business of voter enrollment, ease of voting, eliminating rigging, proper counting, this is a big problem now in India, because if you don't add people's names to the voter list because they are the bad people, then you've already won the election, right? I mean, because we have so many groups out there. So there are too many instances we hear of people being left out of the voter list. Then removing hate speech, the laws are not implemented. One of the top leaders in the recent elections, he said, if you vote for the opposition, they will go to your house, take away your wealth, and give it to those bad guys from the other religion. There is a bad religion in India also. There's a good religion and there's a bad religion. So they say, this guy says, if you vote for those opposition guys, they will take away your wealth and give it to those bad people from the bad religion. And this is a hate speech. And nobody, the courts, the election commission, I went to the court. Nothing. So we feel the ultimate remedy is aware, educated, engaged voters, which comes back to the green thing that even for green you need exactly the same thing. You need engaged voters. So I'm going to skip all this. How am I doing on time? I mean, I can go on and on. So.
You still have 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes. Yeah, I'll just highlight a couple of this. April 2008, there is a body in India called the Central Information Commission, which is supposed to oversee what we call the RTI, which is the Right to Information Act. So we went after them. It took us 4 years of to get the political party information out in the public. Who is funding whom, etc., etc. Let me skip all this. Yeah, the last one, we became a little famous or infamous in February 2024, a few months ago, about 8 months ago. The government had introduced a scheme because the more we were demanding transparency, the more the government was trying to block it. You see, unlike citizens, madam, politicians have a weapon which citizens don't have. They can pass laws. So they amended 4 laws and introduced something called the electoral bonds. The long and short of electoral bonds is, thou shalt not know who funded whom. It shall be a state secret. So they allowed people or corporates to buy electoral bonds and give it to a political party, but that information would not be made public. So we went to the Supreme Court and we said that this is against democracy. So in a landmark judgment, the Supreme Court struck it down. I was amazed that they struck it down because we filed this petition 7 years ago and about 5 chief justices did not touch it. You know, sometimes you don't touch a hot potato. What do? You drop it or you don't touch it, right?
You try, if you're a good politician, you try to drop it on your enemy.
You try to drop it. But if you're a Supreme Court Chief Justice, there is no enemy out there. So he just doesn't take it up till he retires and hands it over to his enemy, that is his successor. Anyhow, they finally took it up and they struck this electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional. You might have read about it in Europe as well. It was news all over the world. So I think we were very pleased that at least some, I won't say transparency increased, but the effort to block transparency was removed. So I am going to skip all that stuff. I don't know how the laws are in Europe, but in India we have a provision of Supreme Court review of laws passed by Parliament. Which means you can challenge a law in the Supreme Court, a law which has been passed in this Parliament, on the grounds that it is unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court used that power which is there in the Constitution to strike down these electoral bonds amendments, laws as unconstitutional. And the grounds for that are that, well, it's a little complicated, but I'll just take a minute since we're talking about democracy. We have fundamental rights like every other country, and one of the fundamental rights is called freedom of expression. It is normally interpreted that you cannot have freedom of expression unless you have information. You cannot express yourself unless information is available to you. And these electoral bonds are making things secret, and they are cutting down on your fundamental rights, and therefore they are unconstitutional because our constitution says that even Parliament cannot pass a law that restricts fundamental rights. That's thank God we have a constitution which works reasonably well. I don't want to take pot shots, but our neighboring countries, for example, Bangladesh, there was this participant from Bangladesh. When we started our work, many activists came from Bangladesh, took our petitions and filed the same petitions in the Bangladesh Supreme Court. Didn't work. The institutional reason for it is that the Election Commission of India constitutionally is an independent constitutional authority who cannot be appointed and dismissed by the government in power. Whereas in Bangladesh, if the Prime Minister doesn't like the election commissioner, they throw him out and bring somebody else. That they can't do in India. So maybe that's the reason, I don't know. So I think I have spoken enough. What have we learned? What have we learned is it is not only about filing petitions. There are 4 or 5 other things we have to do. One is, all of our speakers talked about building a broad coalition. So we have a coalition of civil society partners around the country. We have very good working relationships with the media. The media is, of course, eating out of our hands. They love all this stuff. We have decent working relationships with the courts, particularly the Supreme Court. Until recently, we had good working relations with the Election Commission of India and many eminent citizens who are non-political. They, sometimes endorse the work that we do. I think this building of a broad coalition is very, very useful because we have to reach this information to the people of India. How do we reach it? Of course, we have social media, we give press conferences, we are on TV, the newspapers carry it. But the challenge in India is the 15 or 17 languages. So we have partners in all the states who in the local language spread this message, because our team in Delhi is our capital, New Delhi, we don't know all the languages. I don't think there's any living Indian who knows all the languages spoken in India. At least I have not met anybody. Nobody knows all the languages of India. So we have to depend on our partners in the different states who then spread the message of whatever we are doing to the people, but we have not succeeded. We keep trying. So I think I'll stop here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to our 2 speakers, and I think it's very, illuminating too to know about how you have been grasping the evolution of democracy in India and how you have been also locating your own work and engagement.
Trying to stay out of jail.
And also to engage. I think the different forms of engagement as a founder of an NGO, but also as a scholar and researcher. And I would like to ask you both the same question. So how did you get to decide also to get engaged in politics for you, Pauline, to get engaged in creating these NGOs for you, Trilochan?
Well, engaging in politics was not, I didn't see it first as engaging in politics. At first, I've been just asked 10 years ago, do you want to join the municipal council? Because I need someone, and your father is going to leave the municipal council in the village. And do you want to try to see how the village can evolve? And I said yes. I said, okay, why not? And because I've always been involved in NGOs and different types of engagement like that, because it was very important for me to balance my theoretical work with a real thing on the field, you see. Because if you are just thinking theoretically, you can just sometimes miss a lot of different types of true causal relation in the different thing that you are trying to study. And I always thought that I needed to keep my 2 feet on land to be sure that I'm not going somewhere and just not and being just hypothesis and hypothetical, and that's it. And so I said, okay, I just had two children, and I couldn't go anywhere in my different NGOs, and so I said, okay, why not? Why not? I just go there. It's once a month, and that's it. And I get into the game, and I began to develop a few things for the village, like the youth council, for the community council, and also the welcoming of the new inhabitants in the village, because you know, when you are living at the border of Switzerland and you are a traditional village and you've got a lot of newcomers who are arriving because they want to work in Switzerland, they don't know anything about the history of the village and everything. And so if you want your village not to become a dormitory village, you need to be able to build some places and some activities that put people together for the living together, the social cohesion. And I really think that it can only be made by making the new people aware of the historical anchorage of the village. And so I was trying to do all this, and then I got very engaged in this type of things. And in 2019, I just had finished my research, and I needed to engage in new research to try to complement my 50% of senior lecturer. And then the mayor said, okay, I'm not going to go again. I've been doing only 3 mandates. I was first sergeant before, and so I need to quit now. Who wants to take I engage in a lot of things in the village, so okay, maybe I will try, because that's about the 50% time I'm going to lose with my research, and so maybe it's going to be okay. But really, frankly, I was just thinking locally. I was just thinking the village. I will become the mayor of the village. I got elected, and then say, okay, if you are mayor of the village, you have to engage at the community of communes level, because actually half the competencies of the village are coming from the top. And so I went there, and I saw all the different stuff that we were doing were very, very impacting my little village. And then they say, okay, but now that you are here and that you are doing all this good stuff about environment and green transition, okay, we need someone to go to the department. And I said, okay, let's go. But I'm just a replacement. Meaning that if the one who is a counselor at the department level is quitting, I will be the counselor. But honestly, I hope she's not going to quit. But it gave me access to all the people who are at this level. Meaning that now I can not play, it's not the right word, I can be on the different type of level and see how we need to do things and how to have the network to be able to implement really things, because, as I said, contrary India or Switzerland, France is very, very centralized. And we don't have a lot of room for maneuver to do anything, except trying to have subventions for our investments. And so that's the whole play, and trying to be influential at different types of level. That's not the same in Switzerland. In Switzerland, I really think that you have to be influent at all the levels, but there is a financial autonomy at the state level that we don't have in France. Meaning, and I'm pretty sure that in India you also have a financial autonomy at the local level also, that we don't have in France, because you don't have financial autonomy, you don't have local taxes.
Switzerland is a model.
Okay, Switzerland is a model for that. And so I really think that the engagement came little by little, but first, frankly, it was, I never saw it as a political engagement. I was really seeing it as a local engagement, just following my other NGOs things, because we are benevolent at first. And so that's how it came, and now I see how much politics it plays, but I don't have any political stickers on me, a label. I refuse to go in any party, because on the local level, you don't need a party, you just need to do something.
What about you? About the journey from Bangalore to the, a much more maybe national
We started
scale?
this 25 years ago, when my hair was not of this color. It was of a different color at that time. I think I was very deeply disturbed about the political situation. Like many of our young friends, she's disturbed about Bologna, and she's there, and so on and so forth. I was very deeply disturbed. But the thinking has always been that while it's good to act local, I didn't belong to any place. I belong to India, because I'm not. My parents are from the south. I grew up in Delhi. I lived in the United States. I came to Ahmedabad in Gujarat. So I didn't feel that I belonged to any. I just belonged to the whole country. So I wanted to work for the whole country. And as the Americans say, I was hopping mad. That what the hell are they doing to my country? So let me try and do something. Well, the good thing is that the politicians are also hopping mad with us. So as the Americans said, don't get mad, get even. So we're trying to get even.
Thank you.
It is just channelizing anger in a constructive way, that's all.
And I think on that note, we have been discussing in the conference, and it's one of the projects of the Albert Hirschman Center on Democracy, from protest to engagement. So it's also about looking how, especially young people, have been mobilizing in different parts of the world, especially in the local context, in the forms of protests for climate action, and at the same time how institutions have been reacting or acting in response to these demands or not. So this is a conversation that we've been having, and maybe I'll ask you something to the two of you about this tension between conflict and engagement. But let me first see if there are any comments or questions in the room, both here in Geneva and online. Yes, please. If you can just introduce yourselves briefly and ask your question or make your comment.
My name is Irina Bondarevska. I'm a visiting fellow here in Global Migration Center. But initially, I'm an associate professor from Kiev, Ukraine. I currently live in France. For some time, I worked in Switzerland, and I also saw the differences between Swiss system and French system, but I prefer to live in France. And my question is, Switzerland is a very interesting country for work and for visiting, for tourism, definitely. And my question is, did you encounter any gender biases for women in politics in France. I understand that France is not unified, that there can be differences between regions. But what about your personal experience, if you don't mind sharing something?
That's quite a difficult question. It should be simple, because in France we've got we are supposed to be gender equal, and I know that there is a lot of that have been done into having more equality regarding the gender power inequalities. As a woman, I'm going to say also as a Nigerian-looking woman, not only as a woman, but as a woman, yes, there is some differences. Like in everywhere else, you have to prove yourself to be trusted in your word, in what you are saying. But I would say that's the same thing in for a senior lecturer or for anyone. You know, they've been doing this test in United States with the same lecture given by a woman, but they lower her voice, they change her voice to a male for a batch of students, and she kept the female voice for the other batch, and saying exactly the same thing, and they all noted the male voice better than the woman, because just instinctively people trust more men than women in terms of expertise. That's a bias that we can find in a lot of places. As a teacher, I can tell you that when I enter a room, I have to prove myself when a man can only lose points, I would say. But that said, in France they are trying to say, okay, we're going to give quotas for women to be more active in politics and to have more share and stuff like that. What I've been seeing is much more a question of generation. You've got the old generation who are used to act different types of ways with women, minimizing what they say, and we're minimizing women. And so I have crossed a few sexist remarks, things like that, but not much more than in the university world, I would say. But the biggest bias, I would say, is the different behavior in confronting the different competencies that we have, the skills. And the men don't ask themselves if they are skilled to do something. So they just take the thing. If you say, okay, can you take the mobility competence, they say, yeah, I can. And they will do it. A woman is going to say, oh, I don't have the skills, I'm not sure I can, and they're going to ask themselves. And that's the big difference, because it gives a lot of politics is on the charisma you've got, on when you speak to people. And if you don't trust yourself to do something, people are not going to listen to you. If you wonder if you are good enough at this, or if you say, okay, I'm not sure because I don't know, but I will try to, no one will listen to you. And this is a big gender bias in politics, because men don't ask themselves if they are good enough to do something. They just do it. And it imposes more on people. And so I am quite lucky that with my academic background, I am more trusted in what I'm saying, and I feel more confident in the different tasks I've been trying to do, because I've got my academic background that support that.
And your academic background is in France?
No, well, yes, both. I've got a master's degree in economics that I've been doing in Grenoble. And then I had a postgrad here in development studies. and my PhD in development studies. And now I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Geneva. So in environmental sciences, at the Institute of Environmental Sciences. So I would say that is a lot more confidence, and so it kind of undo the bias about this gender bias that we can find everywhere, meaning that women are less trusted than men in terms of skills. But one part is because they don't trust themselves.
Thank you. If you don't mind a very small comment, cross-cultural differences that in Ukraine, in academia, I worked for 20 years in different universities and I taught in different positions. There is no difference between competency while teaching, while lecturing, between men and women in front of the students. This problem doesn't exist in Ukraine. The question is how professional you are as a lecturer, as a professor. But there is the problem of power. I think it is everywhere. The most powerful positions are mostly occupied by women. And distribution of
But you know, when I said about this thing about the bias differences, the gender bias differences between a male professor and a female professor, it's very instinctive actually. When people think about it, they would say that they make no differences, and they would listen the same way. And I really think that's something kind of, because it's not something that is more male or female. The female student would say exactly the same thing, and it's just a question. I think that it's kind of everywhere that it. In university, you've got the bias that you've got more male at professor levels, and I think that I don't know how many percentage of women are professors in Ukraine compared to men. That's quite high, because here in Switzerland, we've got about 10% professor female.
It has been increasing.
Yeah, it has been increasing because now there's a gender policy that is trying to raise this number. But you've got about 90% of the assistants who are female, and the what we call the intermediate level that are 60-70% female, and then you've got only 10 to 50% that are professors. It's because it's all the institutional bias that is not accountable on wage or on anything, but it just because you've got kids, then you produce less articles when you've got. So there's a lot of different types of things like that makes that. It took me something like 10 years to be stabilized as a senior lecturer, when my husband, it took him 2 years. But it just, it's not something that is built, institutional built. It's just the criteria that makes you raise higher that are kind of biased, institutionally biased, without even usually I give this lecture on gender in French, so I don't always have the words, but we have to deconstruct our look on gender bias, because it's on little different criteria that makes you a professor or not, and all the different types of level before going there that makes it harder for women to get there. And that's it's not going to change very soon about that because of different type of things. But anyway, we're not going to enter all this gender thing, but I understand your question, and I understand the cultural differences you stated in Ukraine. But still, I think that women in politics, the reason why there are so few of them who are going to the top, it's because there's this question of the skills and how you can impose yourself in front of an audience.
Thank you.
Yes, there is a question there.
I'm Pragati. I'm a first year mint student. So in the context of India, we spoke a lot around electoral, like democracy from the context of elections and electoral. Do you think that the acts which are not recent, but around PESA or FRA is much more citizen-driven initiative towards greener initiative, like
You'll have to speak a bit
yes,
louder.
if PESA or SRA are more citizen-driven, right? This is the question.
What?
PESA
If PESA and forest rights, forest rights.
is a much more citizen-driven initiative towards greener transition. Like when we are talking about a greener, green transition.
Our work is on democracy. I am fully in sympathy and also in contact with various activist groups. Our work is not on activism. Our work is on cleaning up democracy. Now, I have not met anybody. PESA is specific to certain regions. It is not ever going to affect the national election. It might be your most passionate PhD topic, but we are working on something that is going to change the country. So you are asking my opinion on PESA, whether it's being properly implemented. No law is properly implemented in India.
I think she was asking if it's citizen-driven rather than its implementation.
Okay,
so what is the role of citizen
so
in bringing this?
Now, see, there are different views on this. Both PESA and the Forest Rights Act, success has many fathers. So lots of people claim credit for that law having been passed. Different civil society groups, bureaucrats, and I'm sure there are politicians also who claim credit for it. So it's not very clear, but definitely civil society had a role to play in pushing and nudging for that bill for many, many years. So that's, in short, yes.
Yeah, I'd like to rebound on that because one thing you said earlier about activism, about protest, and institutionalizing this in political movements. And that's probably the hardest thing to do. I mean, right now we've got at the Institute of Environmental Sciences the generation that was protesting on the street for climate. And the most difficult thing we have to do as teacher, as professor, is to try to guide them into trying to objectivize their fight into research question, and not only being activist in research. And I would say that's exactly the same thing in politics, where you try to implement a law or something. If you are doing it in an activist way, you are just going to foster the people who are agreeing with you and getting all the others against you. And you have to work in a different way. You have to objectivize also your fight. And that's an article I'm trying to finish about South Korea. That's a difficulty to be a reformer, an activist, a protester in democracy, to try to put democracy, because that's the generation from the 1980s that came into power in the 1990s in South Korea when they built up democracy. And the most difficult part is trying to forget that they were on the opposition and only on the mechanism of protesting into governing. When you were saying that in India there were so many different parties, that the one who won were representing only 35% or 25% of the population, and so they were working then to represent those 25 or 35% of the population, and that's what we cannot do as governing. We need to keep the line, of course, not to say, okay, you voted for me, but now I'm not going to do anything for that. But you need also to work for all those who didn't vote for you, because you need to be aware that a lot of people who didn't follow you. And that's how you have to try to objectivize your protest into governing. And that's sometimes the most difficult part to do when you are putting. And in France, you've got a lot of green parties who won the election for big towns, like Bordeaux, like Grenoble, like Annecy, and so on. And at first, it was very difficult for them because they arrived on the big cities, not as big as Bangalore, I have to admit. And they said, okay, now we're going to throw away the table because you're going to see what you're going to see. Everything is going to be a green transition. At first, it was very difficult because they only could manage on the small symbolic things. Like, okay, we're going to say that we are not going to put a Christmas tree on a big place, public place in Bordeaux because cutting trees for the pleasure is not very good. And actually, that's just symbolic. We agree on that. And it was very difficult for them to put their claim into managing the town and the administration. The environmental sectors of the administration who talked to me, they say, well, they first had to get you that before that, we used to do things. We were also working, and just be able to run these general administration things was much more harder and made them focus less on their claims, on their particular claims that were very sectorial and very only on criticism, and they had to transform their criticism into governing, and that was institutionally very difficult to change this, and that's and you know I remember my PhD director, Christian Comilio. He once worked at the OECD, and he was working with the president of Mexico. In 1985. Well, anyway, and he was writing all these things in Brazil, 1985. Cardoso, sorry, Cardoso. And he was working with him at the OECD, and then Cardoso became president. And in the first 2 months, he wrote him, he said, okay, now you can forget everything I wrote before that, when I was just criticizing the governments and stuff like that, because now that I am in it, I see all the constraints and all the managing I have to do, and I will just try to keep 1 or 2 very important highlights points in my program, and to try to put them through, and all the rest is going to be consensus, because that is governing. And that is to choose your priority differently, and you cannot just focus on just protesting, on just criticizing. And you have to build something else, and it's sometimes, and the youth who are protesting for climate, well, they don't vote, because they don't believe in institution anymore, they don't believe in democracy anymore, and they just want to protest. And now we need to make them citizen, from protester to citizen. And that's something that is quite difficult in the actual world, with the way that democracy are degrading today, because there is a lot of defiance towards democracy and institutional democracy in Europe, in the United States. I don't know in India probably yes. Also, and the level of trust in democracy is kind of decreasing everywhere.
All because of the youth, right? Misguided youth are responsible for the lack of faith in democracy.
Yeah.
No, it is the politicians who are responsible for.
That will be the
absolutely. I mean, no
next
question
debate.
In my mind.
That will be the next
You have
debate.
Bolsonaro, you have Trump, you have Narendra Modi, you have
people...
Ortegon, you have Putin. I mean, how many names do you want? Yeah. These are the guys who are making people cynical about democracy. It's not the youth who are protesting, I'm sorry.
I'm not saying that the youth protesting, I'm just saying they are defiant of democracy, and they don't believe that democracy in Switzerland or in France is going to change anything about them. That's the only thing I was saying. I was not saying that...
They have failed to inspire the youth.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And it gets back to the issue of green transition and its temporality and the urgency that is felt by citizens and especially youth to act in order to implement, to stop the current mode of producing and living. So I think that is also something that we need to take into account. But thank you very much for sharing this very constructive engagement of yours, and it was a
Except the
privilege.
last exchange.
No, constructive, I mean, your constructive engagements as citizens in your own countries. So I think that was really inspiring for us all. And also, I think very crucial also to the work that we have been doing together in the
I want to say one
conference.
thing about what she said, very important. I don't want to get into that territory, but you said the way someone perceives herself, maybe with less confidence, reflects on how she works in this. This is true of democracy in places like India. The voters do not believe, most of them do not believe that they are full equal citizens. So that self-belief among the voters, at least in places like India, is lacking. And once that comes up, we'll get better democracy. What can I do? They are all great leaders, you know. That's the problem. So with that self-belief, not only among women, but among people at large.
That's a path of trust, and that,
That is required.
and there is a difference between local trust and national trust or global trust in institution, and there is a very really close relation between how people trust the people around, the proximity of people around them,
Correct.
and the trust that they have in the general image of the global institution. And that plays a lot on how people are going to perceive what the democracy can still do for them or not.
Open question. So with that, I thank you very much, the two of you. Thank you to the audience here, the participants in the conference in Geneva and online. And I wish you a very good evening, and we look forward to being in touch.